Hey there, let me give you a brief overview of the Remote IDE for APL. So in this video, I just want to give you a high-level overview of the components that make up the window that you're seeing, so that you know the name of each component and so that you know what each component does and essentially what it's for. So first, let's identify the components that we're going to talk about. Over here at the top we have the menu. Then on the bottom or below it we have the language bar. Then we have the session, which is this big area right here that's pretty much empty right now. Then on the right we are going to have the editor window. Under the session over here we are going to have the debugger window, and at the very bottom we have the status bar. So the menu is probably the component that you're most familiar with, because many programs nowadays have menus, and the menu just contains a series of tabs that allow you to access different things, different options, different functionalities. For example, the edit tab has this preferences button right here that shows you most of the customization options and the preferences that you can set. And for example, the view tab lets you show or hide several parts of the IDE. And also I think the action tab is very useful because it has a couple of buttons here that are very important if you write code that is taking too long to complete. This is how you stop that code. This is how you break it. This is how you interrupt it. So that's the menu. Under the menu we have the language bar. And the language bar is very, very useful. And I can say important. I was going to say important. I can say important. It's very important because it contains all of the APL glyphs. So the APL glyphs, they're all right here. And the language bar has two main uses. So the first one is that when you click the glyphs in here, you can see that they show up in there. So especially in the beginning, when you don't know the keyboard shortcuts for all of these glyphs, you can come here in the language bar and you can click on them, and the language bar types them down for you. But the language bar is also very useful as a quick reference. For example, let's look at this glyph right here. When you put your cursor on top of a glyph, it shows a tooltip like this that tells you the name of the glyph by itself. So this is the name of that symbol. Then it shows you a keyboard shortcut to type it, and then it tells you its name as a monadic function in this case, and it shows you a couple of examples, and then it shows you the name of the glyph as a dyadic function. Or if it's an operator, let's see, this one for example, quad diamond is the name of the symbol, but it's a dyadic operator that is called stencil, and then it has a couple of examples right here. So the language bar has these two main uses. It lets you type glyphs when you don't know how to type them, and it also acts as a quick reference. Then under the language bar we have this area right here, and this is the session. And when you open Write, it shows some Dyalog version information and some licensing information, and then the date. And then you have this big region where you can type APL expressions and then press enter and evaluate them. And in the session you can see that things that you type typically start a bit to the right so that the results go on the left, and it's easier to distinguish them, because if everything were aligned it would be harder to tell your code apart from the results. And the session is where you are going to do a lot of your work, I guess. Then the editor window is where you can edit some variables and functions and operators and all of those things. So let me open the editor window on a function that I'm going to call errorFun for a demonstration that I'm about to do. So by calling this function, I will open the editor window on this object right here, and let me define it to be this function with 3 dots. Now this is not valid APL code, and this is on purpose. So in here you can edit your functions, your objects, and if you press escape, the editor closes and your changes are fixed. So that's what we call So that's how we say in APL that we quote unquote saved the function and reloaded it or something. So if I start to type its name, we can see that the editor auto-completes it. So it knows about this function. Now, if I call this function with the argument, say 10, I get an error. It says syntax error. Because my code, these 3 dots, this is not valid code. And when I get the error, I get the debug window right here. So we can see this thing on the bottom that opens automatically. This is the debugger window. And now I'm in a debug session. So this is useful if I want to, well, to debug my code. For example, if I check the value of omega, we can see that it is 10. Why? Because I call the function with right argument 10. So the value of omega is 10. Now, similarly to the editor window, when I'm done with the debugging session, what I can do is I can press escape inside the window and it closes, and I'm no longer in a debugging session, because now if I try to check the value of omega, now I get the syntax error because I cannot use omega outside of functions. So that was the debugger window. And then under what was the debugger window and under the session, we have this thing right here that is the status bar, and the status bar contains some useful information. For example, the line number that your cursor is in. So in here it's line 40, but if I move it up, we see that the line obviously changes. And then it also shows you a couple of important informations regarding your, well, regarding your system. And I want to draw your attention to this one right here, the quad SI:0. Now, in order to show you what this does, let me call my error function again. Now that we are in a debugging session, notice that quad SI no longer has a 0 in there, and it also changed colors. Maybe this is not very visible, the color change, but the 0 right there, or the 0 is no longer there. And so this number right here, it not being 0 tells you that you're in a debugger session, and this is useful because sometimes the debugger window is closed, or for example it's very small, so you can't even notice it's there, or you can actually, if you go to view, if you go to window and close all windows, the debugger is closed, so you cannot see it, but you're still in a debugging session. And it doesn't really look like so. So the quad SI over there and the status bar really tells you, okay, just remember that you're in a debugging session. So if you want to open the debugger window again, what you can do is you can go to view, sorry, not view, you can go to action, trace. So now it opens the debugger window again, and you can close it with escape, and now you see that quad SI is 0, so we are no longer in a debugging session. So the status bar really is important because it tells you, well, the status of the things you're doing. And it also includes a nice shortcut to your preferences. So this is it for this high-level overview. We took a look at the menu over here at the top. We took a look at the 2 main use cases for the language bar, which were typing the glyphs and acting as a quick reference. We saw that the session was this big region right here where we do lots of work. We saw that the editor window usually shows up on the right. We took a look at the debugger window, and then we also saw that the status bar was very useful, and in particular it helped us realize that we were in the middle of a debugging session. So that's it for now, and I'll see you later.